Good evening, and welcome to the Clarksville-Montgomery County School Superintendent interviews. Today is May 4th, and we will be interviewing our second candidate, Dr. Mason Bellamy. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
To all who are present for these proceedings, we bring you greetings from the school board. This evening, we'll conduct the interview. You'll be asked a series of questions from various board members. We ask that as you do get answers, that you be as succinct as possible. We are scheduled for an hour and a half time period for questions and answers. And at which time, once we complete that, we will go into a recess, and then the second portion where the employees will be able to ask you questions. Are you ready to proceed, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We're glad that you're interested in our Director of Schools position. What specifically attracts you to Clarksville and the Clarksville-Montgomery County school system?
Thank you for the question, Chair Nelson. Thank you for the board for your time. It's an honor to be here with you tonight, to see your faces again. Many of you I've worked with in the past. And so I'll jump right in to answer that question. Clarksville's my home. It's born and raised here. Been here my entire life and spent the majority of my career here. Went to Carmel Elementary School and I graduated from Montgomery Central High School. I believe in the phrase, it takes a village. And my village is Clarksville-Montgomery County. It has been my whole life. The employees that poured into me as a student, my fellow teachers that supported me as a new teacher, taught me how to be a better teacher. My employees, or fellow administrators, principals that I got to serve with and for. And so when I got to Metro Nashville Public Schools and got the pleasure to start with Dr. Adrienne Battle, my first school visit with her, we went to the school that she graduated from, and I saw a different spark in her eye, and I saw something different when you're passionate about and you're serving the schools that you went to and that you were a product of. And from that moment, I knew that when this job came open, that I would put my name in and put myself out there and ask to be able to serve in that capacity. And so I feel like everything up to my life from this point has led me to this moment, to the moment I get to sit before you. It's an honor to even be able to interview for it. Again, I thank you for your time. I appreciate your consideration. And I'm humbled to be on a list of candidates that some of them have been mentors of mine and I've worked with for a long time, and humbled to be considered. And so again, the short version of that story is I owe everything I am, the person I am, to Clarksville-Montgomery County School System and to the community members that have poured into me. The chance to pour back into them, into the next generation of Clarksvillians, was simply too much to pass up. And I hope to get the chance to serve our principals, to serve our teachers, to serve our students and families and community members with that same passion I talked about a second ago when I saw Adrienne Battle do that in the high school she graduated from. And so I also noticed there's not a question about introducing myself, but I think many of you are familiar with my history, and I wanted to make sure that I got it embedded in there as well, just a product of the school system. Served in schools across the county, from exit 11 all the way to the north side of town. From my school, my last elementary school, I was principal of Hazelwood Elementary School. High military population, and serving the military has been a great pleasure of my career, a great honor of my career. And the one thing I've taken to every office I've had is a military challenge coin that was given to me by a father who was deployed when his son started kindergarten, and gave it to me as a thank you. And so to serve a military community that does so much for our freedoms and our family would mean the world to me as well. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Ben.
Yes, sir.
Excuse me. Can everybody hear back in the back? Okay, I guess I'm the only one that can't hear.
I'll make sure to speak up, Mr. Patterson. My apologies.
Thank you.
Dr. Bellamy, what do you consider to be the major strengths that you would bring to this position?
Thank you for that question, Ms. Berry, and I'm glad that you were one to ask me. I think one of my strengths is my many relationships I have from my history in this district. Just so the board's aware, Ms. Berry and I work together at Hazelwood Elementary School, and we're fortunate enough to get to support Ms. Berry and do some fantastic things for the students on that side of town for Hazelwood Elementary. And so I think my relationships first and foremost. Superintendents are going to come in right away. You're going to be asked to make some tough decisions. You're going to be asked You're gonna have to ask the community to trust you, and community members that you may not have a relationship with yet, board members, county commissioners, parents, and stakeholders. And so I think coming in with strong relationships is a plus. I think another plus when you look at the stakeholders of the school system, I have experience in each one of those groups. When you look at our students, I was a student of Clarksville-Montgomery County School System. I have a student currently in Clarksville-Montgomery County School System. He'll be a rising junior in Clarksville High. When you look at parents as the next stakeholder group, I am a current parent, and so I know what it's like to put your most precious resource in the hands of other people and ask them to love them and take care of them and train them up and be part of the village that will make them into the person they are. When you look at the employee stakeholder groups, I was an employee for 16 years with Clarksville-Montgomery County Schools as a teacher, as an assistant principal, and fortunate enough to work for many great leaders at the district level. And get to partner with my colleagues in operations and HR and IT, and so I think I bring strong relationships there as well. And then the final stakeholder group are community members, and as I stated in my first question, I've been a member of this community my entire life. I was born and raised here. I played ball at the field behind Montgomery Central Elementary School. And then my wife is a member of the community. Her therapy dogs have spent over 200 hours in our schools. So we have strong ties. This is where we go out on weekends. It's where you see us in the grocery store. And so my connection to those stakeholders groups mean you're going to get the best from me 24/7. Every decision I make, I know I've got to look those people in the eye because this is my home. This is where I live, and those are the people that I serve. Beyond that, I think if you look past just check boxes on my resume, you'll see results in each of the last places I've served. In Metro Nashville Public School System, I'm very fortunate to serve 70,000 students, 130 schools. In our winter screening and a nationally normed test, we just showed growth above pre-pandemic levels. We've shown that what we're doing, the hard work, the heroic efforts of our teachers, in both academics and social emotional learning are paying dividends, and our kids are bouncing back at levels prior to the pandemic. Their achievement levels are rising as well, and so I think you'll see direct connection to the success I brought to that position. I think going back to that, you'll see that I was the director of hospitals here in Montgomery County. The pandemic hit in March of 2020, and we shut our schools down. We had almost 500 students that were still credit deficient that year, meaning they were not enrolled in as many classes as they needed to graduate. And when I talk about Herculean efforts and heroic efforts in the middle of a global pandemic, or at the beginning of a global pandemic at that point, what we hoped was the middle, but wasn't, right? Those teachers and those principals rallied around. They made phone calls, they got on Zoom meetings. One of them is sitting right behind me now, Ms. Constance Brown. You give her a round of applause when you get a second, because she personally saw to it that students at Northwest High School got what they needed and graduated when they needed to. And I'm very proud of the fact that the state went back in graduation rate several points. Montgomery County held steady. And then if you go back to when I was the elementary director, I supervised 24 elementary schools, 23 of which were eligible and tested schools. And in that span of 5 years, 18 of those 23 schools won reward status. When I took over some of the elementary schools, we had 3 that were on the ATSI list. They needed some additional support, and we made some changes. We got them the additional support, and they removed themselves from the list within a year. I'm very proud of those efforts and their work. And so I say that to you today just to say that I've gotten results in those places, but please know it's just because the people that worked for me at the time that I was able to support were able to do those amazing things. And so I do believe that I'm able to lead people to those goals. And so that's what I think the strengths I bring to that job. I want to thank you for that question.
Dr. Bellamy, how does your philosophy of education align with our district?
My philosophy of education was molded by this district. Again, I don't want to drive the point home too much that I was a product of Clarksville-Montgomery County School System, because our mission statement wasn't the same when I graduated. That mission was framed when this board adopted policy governance and adopted their most recent manual in 2008. And our end statements clearly say we'll educate and empower our students to reach their potential. And as a young teacher, I had a principal, and I had Dr. B.J. Worthington as a CAO who was constantly espousing that. And he said it in a way with a passion that made me believe it. And that drove who I was and what I wanted to be as a teacher. So my philosophy starts about equity and equipping our students to reach that potential. What does it really mean to equip them to reach that potential? It means that when they walk across the stage, they're able to make the decision they want. We're not a factory, and we're not churning out students to all go to four-year colleges or all go straight into career. We're churning out students who can make that decision for themselves. And so equity is a buzzword a lot of people throw around now. I'm proud to have served for Montgomery County on the creation of the Tennessee Leaders for Equity Playbook the State Department put together many, many years ago. And what that did for me when I came back to the district is it really brought into focus for me that my job is to equip students to make those decisions for themselves. That you show them what opportunities are available, which is one of our end statements, that when students graduate, they will have been made aware of their opportunities to be college and career ready. To make someone aware of an opportunity and not prepare them for it is a travesty. And so I take very seriously that we prepare all of our students academically and social emotionally to equip themselves to take whatever opportunities they want. Whether that's going to college, whether that's going to a trade school. You know, I don't want to be the barber on the barber shop. We want to come out with entrepreneurship credentials, and I want to come out of our business academy and see that for themselves if that's what they want. And so a couple of schools, again, I'll refer back to Ms. Berry working with me at Hazelwood. We used to say every child every day. And what we meant by that was not every child gets the same thing every day. We meant every child gets what that child deserves every day. And little Jimmy might need something different than little Josh needs, and little Margaret needs. And we're gonna give every child what they need every day. The other thing we say is don't give up, don't ever give up. And it's a quote from Winston Churchill and Jim Valvano and the Jimmy V Foundation. And it really captures resiliency because children are gonna fail and they need to fail in safe spaces. And they need to know that there are people that surround them and love them and are here to show them their opportunities, that it's okay to fail. It's okay to be where you're at, it's not okay to stay there. And we want to espouse a growth mindset. So my philosophies on education are driven around that, resiliency and equity. And it's grounded in the fact that BJ Worthing demanded that of me. And I'd be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to my first principal sitting in the audience right now. Priscilla Story demanded excellence of me every second of every day. And I thank her for it because it turned me into the educator that I am. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I believe you answered my question in a previous one, but if selected as director of schools, would you make Montgomery County your place of residence? If it's not already?
Yes, sir, it is already. You can't get rid of me that easily. I will say again, just to reiterate, Montgomery County is not a pit stop on my journey. It's the stop on the journey. When I took an opportunity in Metro Nashville Public Schools system, it was Mr. House had encouraged me to see things, and he had just accepted a contract, and I thought he was going to be here for quite some time. I never thought I'd be sitting in this chair 2 years later. But when an opportunity presents itself, you have to do what's best for you and prepare yourself. And I truly believe that led me here. I've got a ton of experience with great things in Metro Nashville and served with a lot of wonderful people. And so if I'm fortunate enough to be selected here, Montgomery County will maintain my residence.
Hey, Dr. Bellamy, give us an example of when you changed your mind and taken a different course of action as a result of listening to others, either professionally or personally.
Mr. Garland, I thought about this question for a long time after Mr. Nolan emailed it to us because I have a lot of examples of changing my mind about a path to take, an initiative to implement. But I hope what the board's really after here is understanding the process to where if we involve enough people, I think the goal is that we involve people in charting the course and not changing the course. And so I will absolutely give you an example of where I recently changed my mind, but I want to walk you through first what I created. I'm a process and structure-oriented person, and my weekly schedule is built around making sure that I gather feedback about these initiatives, not things I'm doing next week or tomorrow, but things that we're rolling out June, July, August for next year. And so Monday, we're in schools every single morning. Every single Monday morning, Dr. Biden, myself, and cabinet, we're out listening to principals. We do 2 school visits every Monday. We're listening to principals, we're talking to our bus drivers, we're listening to classified staff. We're asking how the work that we're intending to do is supporting them, and is it really paying the dividends they want. We're asking them about what they need next when we go back and plan strategically and when we plan annually. On Tuesdays, I meet with all my direct reports. I'm again fortunate enough to supervise all of the school supervision channels, as well as teaching and learning. And so the Department of Exceptional Education, curriculum and instruction, instructional technology, advanced academics, all of those areas. And I meet with my direct reports, including athletics, and we talk about the same question. What do our schools need? What are they planning? What supports do they need? And all the things that we plan, is it working? On Wednesdays, I'm back in schools with my executive directors, my school supervisors, we call them level directors in Montgomery County. And we're asking those same questions again, but a little more granular about the work, in particular academic work. On Thursday, we set aside time for focusing on innovation, solving the problems that we don't know are coming yet, solving the problems of tomorrow today. And then Friday, we bring my whole team together to do the same thing over again. And so we create those structures and we commit to those structures so that we're constantly asking people for that feedback, so that when we do chart a course, we're not having to make mid-course corrections, but the course has been charted because everyone who, the end user was in mind and was evaluated and got to bring feedback in on the front end. And so luckily, our big initiatives that has allowed us and built a springboard of success, and that we've not had to make any big changes that affect the majority of our teachers. Now, as far as when I've just changed my mind recently, those things happen quite often, right? I had a process, a year-end process for our principals where they're checking off literally a packet of, it must feel like a million things that they have to do to close out the year. And I had decided that I was gonna step out of my comfort zone and create a resource for them to make that more simplistic. And I rolled it out in my Friday meetings that I told you about just a second ago. And one of my executive directors, bless him, he's always very, he's very candid, young man, and he just flat out told me, he said, Mason, this is missing the mark. This is not gonna do what you want it to do, and this isn't where their head's at right now. I appreciate where your heart's at, but you need to let us take a swing at this and wait a couple of weeks. And sure enough, we took it to the team, and a couple of weeks later, we rolled it out, and it did what it was intended to do. But I think that's a great example where even with the best of intentions, I can forget really quickly how far away I still am from the classroom and the building. And if I don't force myself into the buildings and make myself hear from teachers and from principals what's happening every day, hear from bus drivers what they're dealing with every day, then even the things you do with intended support and best intention doesn't always land well. And so I want to recommit to that process. And I think it's important that I had built that structure so that they could tell me, I like your idea, but it's not quite where we need to be right now.
Dr. Bellamy, in your administration, what avenues are open for you to listen to the concerns of employees, students, parents, and the community? How would you plan to have time available for all involved?
Mr. Patterson, I think that's $1 million question. It's so easy to get caught up in the busyness of climbing the ladder that sometimes we don't realize it's not on the right wall, right? I think that's a Stephen Covey quote. And so you have to intentionally schedule it. And so I would create a schedule very much like I had mirrored for me. I mentioned I'm very fortunate to work for Dr. Adrian Battle, a very innovative and passionate leader. And I've seen firsthand that when you set the schedule to listen to your stakeholders, they show up, they listen, they give you the feedback you value, and you build partnerships and trust. And so my Monday would be just that. My captain would meet me at schools on Monday morning, and we would listen to principals, we'd listen to teachers, classified staff, cafeteria staff, bus staff, operations staff, anyone that's able. And the intent of those visits would be to truly get out there and not check on them to see if they're doing the right things, because they are, we know they're working hard, but to check on them to see if our support's landing where it needs and if they're getting what they need from us. After that, we're going to look at establishing meetings probably by quadrant. We probably divide the district up in 4, use our high schools, and we want to give every employee a chance that needs to hear or express their concerns. I have a long history of working with CMCSS and PET here in my current district. I work with M&EA. Every Friday I make time for M&EA so that we're not solving problems once they become urgent and are a 5-alarm fire, but that we're solving them proactively and we're partnering and they're helping us solve them. So once a quarter we would also set out meetings for probably use our high school gyms. We want to make it accessible and easy, so we need to offer childcare. We need to incentivize folks to come out and share with us. And this structure I'm talking about is going to be important to a lot of questions you ask me a little bit later, because I'm going to rely on this exact same structure when it comes to strategic work and when it comes to budgeting. Because you can't just ask people to come around the table when it's budget time and give you feedback. The trusted partner needs to know that they're valued all the time and that their feedback is constantly welcome. And so we're going to set up structures. If you cannot find time to give us the feedback, it won't be because we didn't give you the opportunities. We'll also set up feedback sessions with the community, which we've not always had a lot of luck in education, getting community members to highly attend that. Again, I think we've got a lot of working parents out there. We've got to make it easy for them. We've got to make it interesting for them. And we've got to know that they've got to know that when they speak, that we hear them and see actions taken. So we have to follow up on what we hear them. So we have the employee meetings, the school visits, community meetings as well. And then we're going to partner with, again, trusted community partners. There's outstanding partners in education programs in Montgomery County. But I feel like we can strengthen those partnerships. We can bring our partners to the table and let them know that we're as much here for them as they are for us. But when we can get trusted partners telling our story, I really think we can do something special there. So that's how I'm going to make time to set aside time to listen to the community members that way. And then, of course, there's always channels through email and through the appropriate staff to make sure if you have individual problems for your student or your family, they're solved at the level closest to the child, to the student, to the principal level. So all those will be open to policies and ways that I would want to engage the community. Yes, sir.
Dr. Bellamy, what have you done to help the public understand the needs and successes of your school system?
So I'm going to rely on the system I just explained to you. Again, it's a system that has been in place for me for a couple of years now. Metro Nashville Public Schools, all admittedly virtually at first. And we're just dipping our toes back into the water of getting people to get used to coming out again. But I think one is it's transparent communication, in particular this question, you said the needs and successes, right? And so oftentimes people don't want to just hear us celebrating and touting our own successes. We have to be honest with them and transparent. And so recently I've been able to successfully get support for our literacy program. We just had to be transparent about where our scores were and where they needed to be. We have to, again, I think if we're going to ask for support and we're going to celebrate growth and successes, then we have to be transparent about where we started and transparent that there's a need. I can't ask for your support and not also give you the transparent data of what that need is. I think we have to provide accurate and genuine data. The public has to understand that when they see it, whether it's in the paper, on the news, or whether it's coming from one of our trusted partners, that they can trust the data they're getting and that it's accurate. And we're not only spinning one side of the story. We have to engage trusted partners. And a blessing in my current district is just the absolute plethora of partners that are willing to work with us. Partners like the United Way, Blueprint for Early Childhood Literacy. I was fortunate to partner with the National Institute of Excellence in Teaching as our literacy plan. And so we bring in trusted partners because people want to hear those successes and those needs from people other than just the face of the school system. And so when we bring our partners in to help us with that, they have skin in the game, they help us communicate those needs and those successes, and it helps build trust with the public. Then we provide research-based solutions. So again, it's not, I don't want you to take my word for it. It's not Mason Bellamy telling you this is the thing we need to be doing. It's the feedback loop that I've talked about with teachers, with principals, being in classrooms and school visits, creating those community forums. So I'm taking your feedback. I'm saying this is what you told us that was the problem, what you want us to fix. Here's what we believe is a solution. And here's what the trusted nationwide leader in this says is a solution. And then you present that solution to the public. And garners their support. Again, you've been truthful every step of the way. Here's a need. Our data's not where we want it to be. Here's what you told us you wanted to see. Here's what we're going to do about it. And then you communicate updates. Is it working? What's the return on investment? And let's be honest about that. I just was proud a minute ago and told you about our update for our winter screening, our nationally known test. We can show that our kids are making the gains they need to be making. Is it as quick as everybody would like? Probably not, because it's urgent. Children's lives are at stake. But we're making gains, and we're being honest about those gains to pre-pandemic levels. And so again, we share that with our partners so that they can share it at their meetings. We have a faith-based partner, United for Hope, that's in nearly 60 of our elementary schools that help reading and tutor. And when they have actionable data and they can go to their congregations with that data and say, this is where kids need our help, it brings people out. And so that's a recent success I've had in being able to talk about the needs and successes of our schools.
Dr. Bellamy, how would you measure your success as director of schools?
First and foremost, by our end statements, right? So the board adopts ends policies, and that's my directive as your sole employee to meet those ends policies, right? It's educate, empower students to reach their potential, and then our series of statements of what students will be able to do when they graduate. And so we'll dig further, certainly, and we're going to measure those by obviously standardized achievement scores, right? We can't overlook that. Whether we like it or not, our students need to be equipped and they're going to be judged by those scores. We can't just stop there. Coming out of a pandemic, we have to know that there's successes to be seen in our universal screener and in our skills-based data. So kids didn't just miss some grade level standards, they missed development opportunities, they missed live instruction. And some kids missed more than others. Some kids were harmed more than the pandemic by others. And so we're also going to make goals around that screening data, our basic skills data, and we're going to celebrate when kids are growing at ways that maybe aren't measured by a state achievement test, but we're certainly going to use that as well. Then we've got to set out some SEL goals. We need to talk about attendance. We need to talk about chronic absenteeism. We need to talk about the health of our schools in that way as well. And so all of those are measures that I'll hold myself accountable to as it relates to those end statements. Of course, when we look at the SEL data, I think we would be remiss if we didn't mention a healthy and thriving culture for our employees to work in as well. And so it's one thing to achieve those things, and do so within the executive limitations that this board sets out for me. But if I do it at the cost of the morale of our employees or of our students, then I'm not sure that achieving those things means much. So I think you need robust data on the health and the culture of our schools. I want to know how our students feel about the schools they attend. I want to know how our parents feel about the schools their children attend. I want to know how our teachers feel about working there. I want to know how our principals feel about leading it. I want to know how our district staff feels. I want Montgomery County to be the best employer in Montgomery County and the place to teach in the state and in the Southeast. And I think we have to attend to our culture to do that. The only data I have available to me being outside the district is the Tennessee Educator Survey. And the most recent one, unfortunately, shows that, that some of those indicators for Montgomery County employees right now are underperforming the state. And that's not a place that Montgomery County is used to being. Again, that's the only data I have, and the data was taken last spring, mind you. So take it with a grain of salt that way. It's one data point like anything, but that's one of the things I'd be interested in. I would certainly judge my success by. So I will move for student achievement, just like when I shared with you in my last 3 positions. I feel like I've been successful doing that, but I won't do it at the cost of our employees and their well-being, because they deserve that as well. And a healthy, thriving school is a place where students achieve. And so those are the primary ways that I would measure my success. Of course, ultimately, I'm open to the board's feedback on what they would like to see as a KPI for those ends policies as well.
Thank you.
Dr. Bellamy, since you've been in education as a teacher, administrator, how have you observed changes in student behaviors? And how would you plan to address student discipline to reduce the disruptions in the classroom, as well as provide a safe environment for both staff and students?
Ms. Berry, again, it's fitting that you asked me that question, since you and I shared a unique young man at Hazelwood. I'm not sure if you remember the young man I'm referring to, but you worked wonders with him. So student behaviors has undoubtedly escalated. I don't think anyone is going to argue that point. I think some of them certainly exacerbated by the pandemic. To what degree is very difficult to measure. Right? And so to answer the first part of your question, Ms. Berry, certainly I've observed changes in student behaviors. Our students are not equipped to deal with the trauma they bring into our schools, and it shows in their behavior and their outbursts. I think when you ask what we're going to do about it, that question gets much, much deeper, and I would love to tell you I have a silver bullet and a proposal, and if you just invest some dollars, we're going to fix this tomorrow. But I'm not going to sell you a bill of goods that way. Because the fact is, with anything else, if a child can't read, we teach them to read. If a child can't behave, our tendency is to punish. And we're missing a step. We've got to teach replacement behaviors. We've got to teach coping mechanisms. And those things don't happen overnight. Now, in the meantime, our teachers are struggling. Classrooms are being disrupted, and we need supports for that as well. And so the first thing we've got to do is pay attention to the research. It's clear. There's some dynamic things out there. In particular, one I'm familiar with is Castle Collaborative for Achievement. For social and emotional learning. And so we would look at adopting a framework district-wide. And now, I've been out of the district for 2 years, and so I know that social emotional learning has been on our strategic work board for a couple years. And so I would need to come up to speed with what's been done there. I know we've hired a district-wide coordinator of social emotional learning, and I'm sure great things are happening. And so I would love to see the degree that framework is implemented into our scope and sequence, because it can't be one more thing for teachers to do. Our teachers are already responsible for enough, and our teachers already have the weight of the world on their shoulders and carrying that burden. They don't need one more person to tell them how to carry it or to add one more thing to it. So we have to integrate it in a way where it is part of the job and not another step of the job. And so I want to see what framework we're using. We want to implement it, but when we do it, we have to do it in job-embedded ways. And so what I don't want to do is ask our teachers to spend their entire summer learning new strategies and resources and a new framework. I want to respect them as professionals, give them the mentoring, the job-embedded PD that they ask for and that they need, and make sure they understand that that's a long-term fix, right? We're being proactive so that we can control more proactively in the future how our students are behaving. In the meantime, there are other avenues that we can do to relieve some of this burden as well. We can hire any number of restorative practice assistants. We can increase social workers. We can increase guidance counselors, all of which are meaningful things that need to happen. Because those trusted professionals can help our children. But again, I want to make sure and involve our principals in the process. And so I've been fortunate enough to to work in a student-based budget district the last few years, which means our principals are empowered to make some choices. We give them a menu of research-based options. We look at their data, we overlay the two with their supervisor and the budget committee, and each principal with their leadership team determines what needs will address which one of those menu options will address the needs of their schools. And so in one school, it might be an advocacy center and a restorative practices assistant. In a high school, it may be a reset program. It may be a social worker, it may be a part-time social worker. The two schools can split because they didn't get enough money to buy their own, but they got enough to buy half one. And so we can partner together and use our resources, but I want to empower our principals. What I don't want to do is a one-size-fits-all model. I don't want to bring you a $5 million budget item and say I'm going to put one of these in every school, and that's going to be the magic pill that will work because Mason said so. It doesn't work that way, buy-in doesn't work that way, and students don't work that way. So Ms. Berry, again, I thank you for the question because we have to reduce those disruptions, but it's a long-term approach along with short-term benefits and short-term help, and that's how I tackle both.
Dr. Bellamy, this board's focus is on student achievement, and if you're selected as director, what steps would you take to ensure academic excellence in the school system and the recovery from the learning loss due to COVID-19?
Space, I think the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to, as I mentioned with SEL, I need to get up to speed really quick on some of the things that have been happening in my absence for the last couple of years. But unless this already exists, I'm going to direct my chief of academics in schools and my executive, or my level directors, I say executive directors, that's what I refer to them as in Metro Nashville. My level directors, we will create cycles of ongoing data and then realign resources. And so they will bring on a quarterly basis to the senior leadership team and to cabinet KPIs of how schools are performing, again, not just academically, social, emotional, including attendance rates. And we will align resources, not in a way that we're going to look at it and say this school's not doing well or this school's doing great. And we're not playing the blame game, because if any one school fails, I have failed as the director of schools. It's not the fault of the teachers, it's not the fault of the principals, it's the fault of those of us who support that school and making sure that we've done that adequately. So we've got to create routine structures that we've got to be obsessed with it. We've got to be obsessed with our students' success and making sure we're equipping them to reach their potential. And so we will review that data quarterly. We'll use our research assessment evaluation department to make sure that that data aligns with what they're seeing in KPIs, including social emotional data and including employee well-being data, like I've talked about. And then once we do it, we won't do it to just point some fingers or just to celebrate. We're going to align resources. So if we come out of those meetings and we know a school's struggling and we fail to do something different, that is not school's fault. That is ours. B.J. Worthington used to say all the time, Mason, when you know better, you do better. And so we have to be obsessed with knowing better, and we have to be obsessed with aligning resources to do better. I'd also want to speak with my chief financial officer and make sure that we can use savings we have, in particular sometimes from positions that go unfilled during the year, so that that resource allocation is there. And in future budgets, you'd see me set aside money for that resource allocation, because again, things happen in the school year. People go on FMLA, teachers get sick, principals miss time, principals go on maternity leave, and those things have effects on schools. And the people that can't be affected are our children. And so if we have the resources allocated and ready, so that when we review that data on an ongoing way, that we can align resources as we need. We're also going to use that as a moment of celebration. I'm going to update this board as often as you want to be, either at study sessions or at official board meetings, just like I do currently. When we do screen data in Metro Nashville and the test that I referred to you, that's made public and that goes to the board. It builds trust, it builds transparency, and it tells the public that we're concerned about the things you told us to be concerned about. And that we're going to report out on them, and that we're going to make sure we align our resources that way. Currently, I mentioned before that I've supervised some elementary schools that were on ATSI list. And again, that's not a commentary on the teachers in that building or the principals of that building. It's a commentary on the needs of those students. And it's time we make sure that we allot the resources according to the needs of the student. The state's released a new formula, student-based budgeting. They did it for a reason, because different students have different needs. That's just as true in Montgomery County as anywhere else. So we currently still have 4 schools on an ATSI list. And that's important to know, because if we don't establish a cycle and we don't make sure all of our schools move in the right way, this board just recently rejected 2 charter school applications. Kudos to you for having the courage to keep public money in the public school system. I know that must have been a very difficult vote. If you get a school on a priority list, the state board will be able to usurp that authority. And the charter school will be able to appeal that. The state will be able to overturn that. And so right now, Montgomery County is in a great place to maintain that authority. And as a director, I'm going to make sure you maintain the authority to make that decision. There are 7 people that get to make that decision. They're sitting right up there. And so it's paramount, it's more important than ever that we establish those. But again, in a resource allocation way, we're going to celebrate successes and we're going to support our challenges. It's not about a blame game.
Thank you.
What plan would you implement to recruit and retain a quality, diverse, and talented group of teachers and employees?
Mr. Griffey, first and foremost, we're going to keep doing some of the things we've been doing successfully for a while. And so retention and recruitment have got to be top of mind, but I think we all know that won't get us there anymore. 20 years ago, almost 15% of people going to college became teachers, and now that number is less than 3%. So all the retention and recruitment in the world, we're not going to fill the vacancies we have. We have a great Grow Your Own program that I was humbled and honored to be a part of starting with Dr. Sean Petrus in an innovative approach. And again, I think we're going to have a first crop of graduates probably in the next week or so, and I know you'll all be proud to see that. I've been watching from afar as they graduate, and I'm proud to see that too. So we certainly have to do more of the things that have led us there and put a nationwide spotlight right here in Montgomery County. And kudos to this board for allowing that work to happen and supporting that work. But if we don't look at what is driving people away from the profession and drastically redesign the teaching profession, we're going to continue to have the same problems, and all the Grow Your Own and all the recruitment's not going to solve it. And so to retain and attract a diverse teacher workforce, we're going to do some of the things we've already been doing. We're going to double down on those efforts, but we have got to reimagine the teaching profession. We've got to ask our teachers what it is they want, because they're willing to tell us. I've seen it in the Tennessee Educator Survey. They need more planning time. They want more mentoring. They want collegiality. They want to be able to talk to their colleagues and teach. They want job-embedded PD. They don't want to go after they've worked all day and have papers to grade or all summer long. They want it embedded in their job like any other professional gets to do. And our teachers are telling us those things. They want SEL supports. And if we don't reimagine what the teaching job can look like now, then we're going to be behind the 8 ball in a few years. And so I'm blessed right now to work with a company, ERS, out of Massachusetts. They follow all the research, and again, I think it's important to have a trusted partner that knows the nationwide research. I mentioned NIET, the literacy framework. I'll mention ERS again, because they work with school systems across the nation and look at different ways people are redesigning the teaching job with the resources they currently have allocated. That is how Grow Your Own started here in Montgomery County, by looking at opportunity culture out of Charlotte Mecklenburg and asking how can we make the job more attractive, easier, more competitive pay, and reimagining. One lady I work with calls, we need to make teaching a team sport. Teaching hasn't changed in generations. From when I became a teacher and you shut the door, you were by yourself all day long. And even going back then, I begged Miss Story one year to let me departmentalize in 3rd grade. And that's something that we've been doing in this district for going on 15, 20 years now. And it reinvigorated people for a little while, but that was an innovation from 20 years ago. It's time to ask what the teaching job can look like now, how it can look different. We have some successes right here in some of our own elementary schools and middle schools with, again, the opportunity culture programs that became the ELTR programs. We need to do more of that. We need to ask more of our teachers what they want, how we can attract them to the job. Because if we do that well, and we're the first ones to do it, we will attract teachers from all across the state. People will move to Clarksville to come teach here. Because other people aren't doing it yet, and they're focused on continuing to retain and recruit. And we've got to be on the cutting edge of that. We've got to innovate now before it's too late.
Dr. Bellamy, in the current high-pressure environment of teachers, how will you relieve some of the pressure so that they can do their job more effectively?
Thank you, Mr. Garland. A lot of these questions segue one right to the next for me. So some of what I just said, we're going to bring teachers in and we're going to innovate and redesign. We're going to ask them what they need, and they've already told us. When I left Montgomery County, teachers in elementary school received about 45 minutes of planning time on average. I currently work under an MOU where they get 60. And so I think we can increase our planning time. We can do things for our teachers to relieve some of that burden right now in quick ways, things that they will feel and that they will appreciate. I see on our strategic work that we're refining our curriculum and our materials for them so that they're no longer sourcing their own materials. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, teachers were reporting spending hundreds of dollars of their own money and over 10 to 12 hours a week sourcing their own materials. I think we've done a good job of stopping that. It seems those results are trending in the right way. And so the bottom line is the current demands on our teachers are just unsustainable. And we won't continue to attract and retain teachers when they have that burden, and they need support with the SEL and the behavior challenges that this board's already asked me about in a question earlier tonight. But that is not one more thing for a teacher to do. And I'll refer back to that menu of options I talked about, where a school can choose. If a child comes in as demonstrating this behavior and demonstrating these struggles, do we have the resources to have someone come and appropriately calm that child and teach those replacement behaviors? Or do we sit him in the corner, hope he doesn't blow up, and react when he does? And those are the things that are overly burdensome on teachers. Our teachers are going to work just as hard because they went into this profession to change lives. Teachers work hard, but they want to feel successful. And when you're not supported that way, when you don't have those kind of resources and supports that you know your kids need, you don't feel successful. When I was fortunate enough to start the Opportunity Culture program in our elementary schools, I interviewed countless teachers for probably hundreds of hours. And the ones that left our neediest schools for what they perceived to be easier jobs said it was because they felt like a failure. These were our best teachers that were leaving these schools, and they said all I could see was the kids I didn't reach. And so we've got to let our teachers know they're reaching the kids, and we've got to be there to support them when they're not. So off the bat, there's some ways to relieve the burden, Mr. Garland, but I would want to, again, the stakeholder feedback groups I talked about are paramount to that. I don't want to shove a fix on teachers or schools. That might not be fixing the problem they say they're having. And I think when we empower our principals and our teachers to a school-based budget, give them the opportunity to make those decisions, I think you can sit back and they'll blow you away with the decisions they'll make and the success they have. And so I would want to increase that teacher voice and principal voice, and I would want to hear more from them what they need as well.
Dr. Bellamy, like you said, that some of these questions follow each other, but our student body is different now than pre-COVID-19. Students and teachers have different needs. What will you do to create an atmosphere in the schools that will lead to educational excellence and a positive experience while being mindful of and addressing these changing needs for students and the staff?
In one of my previous answers, I mentioned we need robust data on student perceptions, parent perceptions, employee well-being, and I think it starts right there, Mr. Patterson. We've got to have them tell us what their needs are. I can't just look at their academics data and say, you need to do better or you're doing good, congratulations. We have to know what their needs are in research-based, accurate ways so that I can advocate for the funding and the support it needs to fix it. But we have to know there'll be a return on investment. We have to trust and know that we're fixing the right things. And so I think it starts, and I'm blessed now to see, we work with a company, Possum, and another one named Panorama, that gives us family and student feedback every 2 weeks. It also allows them to give a shout out to teachers, and it's become a huge positive culture shift. During the pandemic, I'm fortunate enough to see the heroic work of our teachers and our principals at Metro. Our climate averages in Panorama have actually improved through the middle of a global pandemic. Because we ask about them early, we ask about them often, and we expect action when we do. My executive directors meet with their principals and formulate plans, and we ask how we can support. And so I don't want to just pretend like COVID-19 brought this on. It certainly exacerbated things, but we knew a lot of these things were happening. And I think it's time that we step back and assess those things. And so I want to make sure that we do just that, and that we have robust systems to know that whatever we're offering is what they need. But once we establish what those measurable goals are, we'll bring forth a specific plan to address them. We'll treat it like every other piece of strategic work. We will get feedback. We will roll out a comprehensive plan. We'll fund it fully. We'll measure it along the way. We'll ask what's working, what needs to be changed, what do we need to do more of, what do we need to do less of. We'll ask our teachers, and we'll monitor whether or not those results and the well-being is changing and that we're seeing. And again, I've mentioned it several times, but I'm going to empower our principals with choice. I want them to be creative in a way, whether it's title funds, ESSER funds, or whether we're able to look at the way we fund schools based on the individual needs of those students. I want them to be empowered with that choice. And I think if we do that, we've got the structures in place to lead to academic success. Montgomery County has a rich history of being academically successful. And as long as we attend to what's coming on the social emotional front, attendance, chronic absenteeism, many of those other indicators that we see now, then we'll continue the success in an academic way. And so, but I want to know that we're measuring it accurately, and that the money I'm asking this board to approve in a budget and that the resources we're putting forward, I want to know that it's going to what our teachers, and what the data, what our principals, what our students, and our parents are saying they need the most.
Dr. Bellamy, how will you ensure students, staff, volunteers, the community, and the school board members are engaged in the development and implementation of your long-range goals and strategies for the school system?
Mr. Baggett, I warned you guys I was going to come back to my schedule of meetings again and again tonight, and so I'm going to start this, one of my first opportunities to refer back to that. And so when I came in tonight, my eyes were drawn to the back wall where the strategic work poster sits, right? And having worked at the district level for many, many years here in CMCSS, I'm very familiar with the strategic planning process and the strategic plan. I also know that when I visit schools and I ask teachers about the strategic work, most of them don't know what I'm referring to, unless I refer to the poster, and in which case a lot of them will start to understand it's on the picture on the calendar, on the poster. We have a great strategic planning process, and we have got to engage people and make them realize they're engaged. It's got to happen. And so we're going to I'm going to again refer back to the schedule of those ongoing sessions, because those sessions will be driven by and predicated on the development, reporting out on strategic work. And so when you come to those sessions, there will be no way to ignore the fact that these are the things you asked of me. These are the things you said we needed to do. This is how we're doing it. This is how we're funding it. And this is whether or not it's working. And that'll be an ongoing chance for stakeholders, whether they're employees, whether they're parents, community members, county commissioners should be invited to those. It'll be a chance for every one of them to weigh in on the strategic work and not be told what the goals of our district are, but be part of creating those goals. I mentioned about changing course and changing my mind earlier, that when we involve enough people, the goal is that they help us chart the course, not that we finally listen and change the course. And so the entire structure of the plan and the organization that I put forth to you is so that everyone who wants to be involved will have plentiful opportunities to do so and to report out. My goal would be that everyone sees that poster and knows beyond a shadow of a doubt that they had a vision in drafting it and creating it. Not just that this is what the people who work at central office told me that we were doing, or that our budget did. And I will bring back a strategic plan to this board that you can be proud of, that you would know the community gave input, that your constituencies were heard, and that represented your values. So we'll share those goals, solicit feedback, get inputs, we'll draft and share. And then from that point on, it's going to be everything we talk about, everything we do. That is the work. That's what we've said matters most. That's what we've said will get us to our ends that you've hired me to get you to. And that's what the work will be about.
Dr. Bellamy, CMCSS has always been a leader in education and innovation in the state of Tennessee. What is your vision to continue that leadership role?
So Clarksville-Montgomery County is absolutely on the cutting edge, and has been a leader in innovation. And it's been seen recently on the news. Miguel Cardona recently put forth a challenge to the rest of the nation to look at what's going on. And that started right here in Montgomery County. We should all be very proud of that. And I'm proud of the small part I played in that and the role I had in that as well. My vision for innovation would be that, honestly, we would continue just that. We have to diagnose not the problems we currently have, but to diagnose the problems of tomorrow. And so the ELTR program, when it was first started, was really two different things that Dr. Harris was working on and I was working on. And I was trying to solve a student achievement problem, and he was trying to solve teacher recruitment problem. And those two things came together, and when they did, it was pretty magical how they came together and what that turned into. But it's, again, because we were both solving problems that were down the road and not fires that we were trying to urgently put out. And so I think we've got to make sure that we're still discussing the problems of tomorrow. We have to make sure we're treating the cause, not the symptom. When we get caught up in education and treating the symptom, student achievement's low, student behavior's bad. Those are symptoms that pop up. They're not the cause. Right? The cause of student behavior being bad is multifaceted, and it's a long-term fix. Just punishing doesn't fix your way out of a behavior or a discipline problem. The symptom of low student achievement is caused by a variety of things. In this case, it was the fact that students in certain schools were 3 times less likely to have teachers viewed as effective on the state rubric, and that's because they were getting brand new teachers every single year. The The job was too hard. We redesigned it, we created a new program, and that's become the pride of this district. And so we have to create structures where that's the expectation, and that we're solving the problem of tomorrow. And so one of the first things I would do is I would direct my chiefs and my executive directors to spend a certain amount of their time every week. I mentioned my weekly schedule to you earlier. Every Thursday morning, I'm working on innovation. And that means I'm meeting with partners. That means I'm listening to teachers and principals. I'm convening stakeholder groups about problems that are not yet on our doorstep, because we can't wait till they are to fix them. We have to fix the problems of tomorrow today. And so each chief will be responsible for that. And again, I think it's important to understand how one of the biggest successes of this district, the Grow Your Own program, came to be. That came to be because Mr. House created an environment that gave us the room to innovate. He expected that we innovate. He looked at me and said, you've got some elementary schools that are struggling in this way. If they're still struggling this way next year, that's on you. Now, it's a hard thing to have a superintendent look at you and say, it hits hard, it hits home, but it's the truth. And so I immediately went out and started talking to principals, started talking to teachers. What would have made you stay? What would make you apply for that job if it came open? That led me to the Opportunity Culture and the work of Public Impact, a fantastic organization. Led me to a visit to Charlotte-Mecklenburg. All programs and ideas that we came forward, brought back, talked to all of our principals, talked to everyone about, and said, which one of these things sounds right to you? Which one of these things do you think will fix your problem? Before you knew it, we had residents, and we were figuring out ways to pay for their education without costing anything. We had a state model that went across the state and across the nation now. And Montgomery County should be proud of that, and you should be looking your eye to the future to continue that kind of innovation. And that's what I would expect if I were the director.
Dr. Bellamy, CMCSS board operates under policy governance. What is your experience with policy governance, and how comfortable are you in operating in policy governance system?
Ms. Berry, for my last 6 years in the district, I served on the senior leadership team and got an up close and personal look at policy governance. I'll admit that when the district first switched to policy governance, it was a big to-do, and we all celebrated it, but I don't think everybody really understands the power of policy governance, to be honest with you. I know this board has been a board of distinction multiple times, and I venture to bet some of it you probably believe is because of your governance model and how effectively it functions. And so I think it's important to know, and I've mentioned it in several other questions, I understand that this board adopts ends policies, and that's my goal. That's my charge, to get to those ends. Then you adopt an executive limitations. And that's you telling me, here are the guardrails, don't drive outside of them. Everything else is on the table, but not these 14, not these 15 things, not these limitations. There's a reason that Fortune 500 companies use policy governance. It creates innovation, it creates space, it creates empowerment. Because the board tells you this is your goal, this is what you have to do. I'm not going to tell you how you get there, because the minute you tell me how to get there is the minute you own the problem, is the minute I can say, no, you told me to do that. And that's why it's a universally adopted model, again, of many Fortune 500 companies, because it creates defined autonomy, and that's a powerful thing. So as your director, you say, Dr. Bellamy, you're going to go get these results for us. Here are the things you can't step outside of. Everything else is on the table. Everything else is up to you. And I think that's a powerful thing that we don't talk enough about. And there is a trust that has to go into that, and a relationship that has to be built with this board. And again, that's why I think it's important when I tell you how I'll judge my success, because executive limitations may or may not say exactly what employee morale is expected to be. It doesn't say exactly everything I can't do, only these big things I can't do. And that's me telling you that I'm going to go after the results you want. I'm not going to do it at the cost of our employees or our employee morale. In fact, the exact opposite. I'm going to bring to you a district that everyone is proud to work in, wants to work in, and policy governance is one of the ways that's going to happen. That's what's allowed for some of the innovation that's happened in this district, and it's what will continue to allow us to be successful. I think one of the strengths I bring to you, and to go back to the first question, is that I've also operated the last 2 years of my life in a more traditional governance model for schools. And so I know also very much what it's like to have to garner support and drive up a coalition and communicate data and transparency and build a need so that the board understands this is what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, and asking your vote for those things. And so when it comes to policy governance, building that trust with you guys and that relationship with you guys, I want you to hear me say I understand the model very well. I'm excited about the opportunity to work in it, and I think the fact that I've also worked in a more traditional model is just all the more, frankly, all the more empowering, and how much I appreciate the policy governance model in which you do. Thank you.
Dr. Bellamy, tell us about the most important decision that you have made in your last or your current position. How did you involve the people who would be affected by that decision?
Ms. Pace, I struggled with this question mightily. I'm not going to lie to you, because I lay awake many, many nights thinking about decisions I've made and the 70 or 80,000 students they affect. And prior to that, I lay awake many nights in Montgomery County and thought about the 20,000 elementary school students or 12,000 high school students. And so again, I never want to forget that my decisions have very real consequences and effects. But I don't work directly with kids. I don't even work directly with principals anymore, right? So I affect change through my direct reports. My direct reports, my executive directors, again, Montgomery County will refer to them as level directors. And so I feel very strongly as a level director that I will always hold myself to a standard above or higher, or at or above the standard that my schools are held to. Every teacher in this district gets an evaluation score every year. They get a teacher effectiveness score. Now, it takes some nerve from the state to think that you can measure a teacher's effectiveness in one score, right? But nonetheless, we try to do it. And the fact that our teachers get that one score that's 50% of their data, 50% quantitative, 50% qualitative, right? Observations from their principal. And our principals get an effectiveness score every single year as well. And so it used to bother me tremendously when I led the elementary schools or the high schools here that I wasn't subject to that same effectiveness score. And so I got to where I was computing it on my own. If my schools, if my schools were not achieving the way they needed to be, then my chief academic officer and my director of schools needed to hold me accountable for that before they ever went and had a conversation with my principals. And so you asked about one of the most important decisions I made, Ms. Pace, and when I got to Metro Nashville, I had 15 executive directors that are in charge of 130 schools. The scope and the breadth of that, not gonna lie, gave me a little bit of anxiety. And I thought, how are we gonna make sure we're doing right by every kid in 130 schools? I can barely remember the names of all the schools and principals when I got there, right? So how am I gonna make sure that we're holding ourselves accountable that way? And so I put it to my executive directors. I explained to them what I wanted to do, what I did when I was here, how I was holding myself accountable for that. And I flat out asked them, I said, if you were still a principal, what system would you want to see your executive director held accountable to? And let's build it, right? And so I got them on board. They built a system that mirrors exactly what happens for their principals. So we have our focused outcome data, our student achievement data, our SEL data. We're looking at disproportionality to make sure our behavior practices aren't disproportionately affecting one subgroup over another. They went above and beyond and held themselves to a higher standard than even the state does or principals or teachers. Since that meeting last spring where we put that in place, I've noticed a direct change in my executive directors, what they do every day, how they support their schools. My phone rings off the hook with advocacy for their schools because there's a direct through line of accountability. In our summer meeting last year, we launched for principals. We told them how we were going to hold ourselves accountable because I take my executive director scores and I create one for every battle. And I show her quantifiably whether or not I've done my job as well. Because I'm never going to look the principal in the eye and hold them to a standard I won't hold myself to. And so we created that system. You may be looking for an answer that's more directly related to kids, but that's how I affect change for kids. I work with the executive director team. The second year, I branched out to my Office of Teaching and Learning, and their SMART goals. If you're my director of advanced academics, I want to know how you're making a difference for kids in AV courses, in Cambridge courses, and IB courses. I want to know if my ready to graduate rate's increasing because of something you did last year. Because we hold schools accountable that way. And people shouldn't look to come to central office because it's an easier job or a less stressful job. You should look to come here because it's your passion to support schools and support students. And so I think that's probably the most important decision I've made since I've been in this position. I think we're seeing results from it. I think you hear our principals say they believe it. We also measure culture through Panorama, through POSSA, and through our 360s. We implemented a 360 instrument so that we measured whether or not we were doing this in productive ways that supported our principals. And it's absolutely vital that our schools believe we're being held to the same standard that they're being held to. Not just that they believe it, but that they know it and they trust it. Thank you.
How would you make sure that the public knows and supports what's happening in our schools?
Mr. Griffey, not to be a broken record, but I'm gonna go back to my meeting schedule, right? Because again, if that meeting starts with that poster right back there on the wall, and after one cycle where I can look at every parent, every stakeholder and say, these are the things you told me you want represented. This is the work we're doing. Look at our budget. This is how it's funded. Now tell me if it's working. Tell me if there's a return on investment. So that's how the first way I'm gonna make sure the public knows and supports, because they're gonna know and support what we're doing because they were part of creating what we were doing. They helped chart the course. They didn't help us change the course. Beyond that, I think we've got to, and again, I'll go back to the Tennessee Educator Survey, not to beat a drum on that again, but over 40% of our employees are saying that we don't do enough to engage our parents. If our own employees are saying that, then I would imagine that our parents are saying it as well. But again, I want to be clear, that's not failure at the school level. Schools do plenty of events. They have plenty of athletics. They reach out. Schools need our support at the central office level for doing that. And so how would I make sure we support and know what's happening is we're gonna continue to support our schools in having robust offerings for parents, and we're gonna find out how we can help. Every support hub is what Dr. Battle has conditioned me to call the central office. It's a support hub. So every central office employee will adopt a school. It can be one you live by, it can be one you work near, it can be the one your kids attend. But we're gonna have a calendar of events of what's going on, not just athletic events, but what kind of parent engagement, community engagements events are happening. Partners in education events are happening, and we're gonna show up to support. Again, just because you work at the central office doesn't mean that you're immune from nights and weekends. We ask our teachers and principals to do it. If it's good enough for them, it's good enough for us, and we'll do it too. And so we're gonna also try to fund that initiative. Again, I'm gonna work with our chief financial officer. I'm gonna find out what savings we can find. And I'm gonna give schools a budget to do that. They shouldn't be asked to do that of their own accord, and we certainly shouldn't take money from our teachers to do it, or from our students to do it. And if we're gonna ask teachers to show up and be there, the central office should be there as well. And so we're gonna make sure that we make the most of those events that are already happening. I'm not asking schools to do extra events. I'm saying let's support them differently. Let's have advertising. Let's show up and let's bring the community out on top of the feedback loop where we can embed the calendar of those events. And we can make sure the parents know about it. And then finally, we've got to open our doors to our partners. I was having a conversation with one of my references the other day, a longtime businessman here in Clarksville. And he said, Mason, if we're walking down the street and we saw each other, you'd smile at me, right? I said, yes, sir. He said, well, I think it's time the school system smile at their partners. And I know that we do, but I think what he was saying, smile first. Don't just say, I need your help this way, but how can we help you? Come on in. And that hit me in a different way, because as a principal, I used to call my partners a lot, the church down the street, the Zaxby's, but almost every time it was with an ask, right? It wasn't just to see how business was doing or how their congregation was or if there's anything I could do for them. And I think as your director, that's what I want to do. I want to make sure we open up opportunities, that it's a two-way street, that everyone says, these are community schools. We don't own these schools. We don't have, they're not just mine. They're not just ours. They're the community's. And if we expect the community to support us, then they have to know what's going on. We have to be transparent. We have to go out of our way to engage them because people are working hard. They're busy. If not, they're only going to call us when they have a problem. And that's a tough place to be. I want them calling us when things are going good. I want them celebrating with us too.
Yeah, Dr. Bellamy, you mentioned the fact that parental support. My question is, have you been successful in getting strong parental and community support for a school, program, or district? If so, tell us about one such success.
Yes, sir. This one was a fun question for me to try to answer, Mr. Garland. So when I went to Metro Nashville in July of 2020, they just recently adopted a new literacy curriculum, which in the past is not really something that is altogether something you have to garner support for. We go through curriculum adoptions on a regular basis. We buy books and we put them in teachers' hands and they go about the business of teaching. But whether it's through COVID or just through legislation, literacy is something that's become a hot button topic. And so we couldn't just take for granted that we were going to buy all these materials and put them in our schools and everyone was going to be happy and joyous for us. And so we started out of the gate mirroring a plan that I've already talked to you about a little bit. We were transparent about the need. We simply put out the data. Here's the rate at which our kids are reading. What we've been doing for 20 years is not working. We cannot do it to another generation of students, right? In particular, our neediest students. The equity lens was clear that old ways of teaching just weren't working for the majority of our students, in particular, students in poverty. It was not working for. And so we were clear about that. And we engaged partners, and we asked them to be clear about it too. I'm not asking you to come alongside and help I'm telling you, here's what the need is. I hope you're inspired to help, right? When I tell you the need, I shouldn't have to ask. I bet it will just be there. And so we were able to partner with folks. We did hundreds of hours of listening sessions with not just teachers and principals, but parents, because guess what? A new knowledge building curriculum is difficult for kids. It's difficult for teachers. It's difficult for everyone. So we want parents to know when your kid comes home and said, I read this book 3 times today and I struggled with some of the questions. It's a good thing. It's good because struggle leads to growth. And growth leads to those goals we talked about. They should struggle in a productive environment where they know they're safe, right? That resiliency I talked about. And so those hundreds of hours turned into a comprehensive research-based plan that we rolled out, a 15-point plan. We told you this is what you said you wanted from us. This is the need we've identified. Here are the 15 steps that we're going to take you to get there. Some of them are not going to feel perfect. Some of them are going to hurt a little bit, but our kids deserve it. We rolled it out and we were transparent about it. We funded it fully. Funded it fully. For the first time in history, every single teacher and every single kid in Metro Nashville Public School systems have the books they need, the resources they need, they had them ahead of time, and they had the training they needed. And that's something that cost a great deal of money, but it would not have happened without being able to bring the community and the public along. Because again, those adoptions are expensive. This district sitting in right now has adopted but not purchased before, right? And so again, if we're going to ask our teachers need the materials, they tell us they need it. If we're going to adopt, we should purchase, we should train, we should fund. We fully funded the plan. We've gotten ongoing feedback and support. We have become obsessed with feedback and support. Every chance we get, when we're on those school visits I mentioned on Monday mornings, we ask, how's it going? Take us to your kindergarten teachers, take us to your second grade teachers, take us to your teacher of the year. Want to know how it's going, I want to know what else you need, what trainings do you need? And then finally, we've been honest about results every step of the way. It was a great pleasure I had in February to have my executive officer research assessment and evaluation presented to the public and to the board. The fact that our kids are coming out of this pandemic, they're coming out strong. And so that is something I've been a pleasure to get community support about. Prior to that, as principal at Hazelwood, I was blessed to get a ton of community support at Hazelwood. We opened up, or the district opened up a new school right down the road from Hazelwood. Took several hundred of our students, and within a couple of years, we had enough community buy-in and enough success that the doors were busting again. They were bringing portables, and people were moving into the zone just to attend Hazelwood Elementary. And again, that's not anything I did. That's the work of a wonderful staff, of which Ms. Berry was part, and other folks here in the room part of too. So I'm honored to get to support folks in that way.
Dr. Bellamy, explain how you would develop a school system budget and tell us who you would involve and how you would involve it.
All right, Mr. Patterson, for anyone keeping score at home, I think this is the third time I'm going to bring up my community meeting schedule. So my community meeting schedule and my school tour on Mondays, that's the first starting point. I'll point to our wonderful poster in the back about our strategic work. Once again, that strategic work should be aligned to every dollar we ask for in that budget. So the stakeholder drive will involve, one, we're going to talk to students. Students will tell us what they need. Students will tell us what they need more of. They'll tell us what they don't need. We're going to talk to parents. We're going to talk to employees. That means all employees, teachers, principals, bus drivers, cafeteria workers, classified staff. There will be plentiful opportunities in an ongoing way. Spring's not budget season. Every season is budget season. We ask for a great deal of trust from the public and a great deal of support. And we owe it to them to be clear about the return on their investment. We owe it to them to be clear about the needs of this district. So that meeting schedule is primarily how we're going to do it. And the first one's in the fall. We're going to talk about this is what was funded. These are the needs you told us. How's it been going since school has started? What's our current return on investment? Because we've got to measure it. If we invest in social emotional materials, if we invest in well-being surveys, we've got to look at them. We've got to know if they're working. And so let's look at the early data. When I said I'd direct my chief academic officer to bring me results on a quarterly basis of our schools, how are they performing? Did the money we put into them make a difference? If not, let's look at different resource allocations. And so it's an ongoing process. So in the fall, is it working? In the winter, we'll focus on return on investment so that we can go to our funders, to our funding body, and to our public at large and say, guys, what you told us is working. Here's the return you're getting. Or every now and then, we have to expect that it won't pay the dividends we thought it would. We absolutely hope it will, but we have to be honest if it doesn't, and we have to say we're going to change course. because this need is not fixing the problem the way we thought. And again, I think if we empower our principals to choose and not do a one-size-fits-all blanketed approach, I think we're much more likely to have a return on investment. And then I'll use a protocol that I've found from a mentor of mine in the TSBA Academy I went through years ago called Circle, Squares, and X's. And so I'll give you a draft budget and say, what in your circles is around your mind you have some questions about? What in here really squares with your thinking and you think yes to do more of? And do you see anything in here that's an X for you that you think, I don't know that we need that anymore? But every line item in that budget, we should be looking at a return on investment. And then I'm going to present an aspirational budget. I want to be clear with everybody that the things we need aren't always funded. And if we left something off the table, there are consequences to that. Now, I don't want to sound like a child who just wants a bigger allowance, but at the end of the day, if we make a case and we say this is what our community needs, this is what our teachers and our staff needs and our students need, then at some point we have to make a decision. We have to be clear. If we choose not to fund that, but it's important that people see the aspirational budget and not just that I'm going to bring you. I absolutely will work in good faith and do my absolute best to bring a balanced budget and not ask for tax increases or raises. But at the end of the day, we've got to be honest. So we will talk in aspirations. We will talk in terms of aspirations and what we need to get the job done. And then when we make decisions, we'll know what we decided to prioritize and what we didn't. But it needs to be clear to everybody what it takes to fully fund the Clarksville-Montgomery County school system.
Dr. Bellamy, our board is dependent upon the county commission to fund the budget. How would you propose to gain their support of the budget?
Mr. Baggett, thank you for the question. I want them a part of every meeting I just talked about. And so when we break the county into quadrants and I ask for community stakeholders or parents, I'm going to have my staff there to make sure that we're checking every box and making sure every comment, every need, everything is monitored. Because I don't want them to see it as my budget or your budget. I want them to see it as our students' budget. And so I would like, as a county commissioner, to see every one of my constituents. If I support Northwest and that meeting happened at Northwest, I would like to know, here's the feedback, not of my parents, not of my students, of your constituents. Here's what your constituents said they needed. Here's what that mother working 2 jobs who went out of her way to come to this meeting to tell me and advocate for her kid, this is what she said she needed. This is what our hardworking teachers said they needed. And so I want to be very clear with them and articulate. I want to open our doors. I think it starts in transparency and it starts in building trust. We have to know they have a very difficult job. It's tough to choose between hiring a teacher or a police officer. And I'll be the first one to tell you that if I pick up the phone and call 911, I want someone to answer. And I also want someone to be there to support my kid and love them when I drop them off at school. But I think we have to bring them in and they have to see it as being part of the process because they're taxpayers, they're constituents, and they're representative of our families. And so I think when we're transparent about our successes, I think when we build a return on investment calculator so they see, here's in a good faith effort, the things you gave me last year, what we did with it and the dividends it's paying. Here's what your constituents are saying they need more of. Here's what they're saying they need less of. I think when we do those things, we'll bring them along and we'll garner support for it. And then again, at the end of the day, I think we've got to respect that they have tough decisions to make. I want them to trust our expertise and I want to be able to trust their intent, that they're making decisions with the best intent in mind. And to do that, they can only make as good a decision as the information I give them. And I think it's important that we do that. So I'm hopeful, again, Mr. Baggett, you're number 4 for my community meeting schedule, that I'll bring it up. But I'll use that same community meeting schedule. As I told you, I'm a creature of routines and habits. And I think if you build those intentionally, you make sure you're doing it proactively, they see themselves as part of the process, just like our teachers see themselves as part of the strategic work, in my vision, and not that it's being done unto them, or that we're bringing in a request of funding.
Dr. Bellamy, high-performing students and accountability are priorities for our schools. How will you assess the district's current level of performance, program effectiveness, and teacher effectiveness?
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. I already hit on teacher effectiveness, a little bit of program effectiveness, and I think I want to go back to, I believe it was Ms. Pace's question about the most important decision I made. So I'm going to establish criteria that we're going to all hold ourselves to the same standard we hold our schools to. And so when we look at schools, we're going to look at student achievement. We have to. We owe that to our kids. We're also going to look at screening data and the growth they're making coming out of this pandemic. We're going to look at their SEL data, their attendance rates. Kids can't learn if they're not in school. We're going to look at chronic absenteeism rates. We'll look at all those holistically in the routine basis that I referred to having my chief academic officer bring those results and resource allocation. As part of that, though, we are also going to measure teacher satisfaction, employee satisfaction in our schools. Do they enjoy the job they're doing? How can we make it better? Because a satisfied employee is one who's going to give their all to students, make them feel valued, and they'll do far more than you've ever asked them to do, right? So we're going to make that part of our metrics as well. And then parent-student satisfaction, we simply have got to know, are we doing the job that parents and students expect? And we can't be afraid of that feedback. And if we get feedback that says we're not, we have to listen, because that's who we're here for. We're here for the parents and students. We're here for our teachers. We're going to build a system for the district as well, much like the one I explained for Metro Nashville. So every central office employee has got to determine what is it they're doing in a day that's leading to school effectiveness and school support. So we're going to measure through a variety of SMART goals and evaluation systems that we'll ask the accountability office to help us create. And then ultimately, we've got to measure whether or not what we're doing in the central office is really supporting kids. A dear mentor of mine has told me, we exist to support schools. The day we don't do that, we don't need to be here. That's our full function, to support schools, to remove roadblocks, to get them out of their way. And so we're going to measure to the degree that we're doing that by asking our schools how we're doing that. We'll use my meeting structure I talked about to measure some of those things. And ultimately, we're concerned about employee well-being at the central office level as well. We're going to measure that. And again, we're going to make this a healthy, thriving climate. We're going to be obsessed with it. We're going to make this the place to work in Montgomery County. So those are the two different ways I want those systems to merge to make sure that not just high-performing schools, and certainly not just teacher effectiveness, but employee effectiveness. Teachers are powerful and they work directly with kids. Our job is to support them, and are we doing that effectively? So I'm concerned about employee effectiveness as well as student achievement and teacher effectiveness. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Bellamy, give some specific examples of actions that you've taken as a teacher and administrator that you think contributed to making your faculty and staff an effective team. And how would you build support for that change even in the face of opposition?
Ms. Berry, keep asking me questions that make me smile about our time together, I'm not gonna lie. Because you were part of a very effective team. That fourth grade team was very high flying. And I would love it to ask you if there's anything I did that you thought to help create that environment. But I think about a story, one of my references, Dr. Candace McQueen, now president of Lipscomb. I was fortunate enough to work with Dr. McQueen when she was the CEO of the National Institute of Excellence in Teaching. And she told me a story that Governor Haslem, when he hired her to be the Commissioner of Education, he said, Dr. McQueen, you really only have, in a position the size of yours, you really only have 3 things you have to do. So don't overcomplicate it. You have to make sure your employees know exactly every single day what it is, the mission is, what are they doing today. So long-term goals matter, improving student achievement matters, but as a teacher, what are you doing today? What do I need from you today? You need to make sure that you ask, what resources do you need from me to get that done? What support do you need? Then you need to look them in the eye when they've done it, and you need to tell them thank you. And so Dr. McQueen, I was trained in microbalance leadership, and I had a long-winded answer about purposeful community, but I realized that Dr. McQueen's story really hits heart of that. And so at Hazelwood Elementary, that's what I did as a principal. We set goals for our kids, and I told my teachers, this is what we need to do every single day. This is what our job is today. Teaching this content, being with these kids, that's the most important thing in the world right now when you close that door. And then I made sure I went to collaborative planning sessions. They saw my face every single Tuesday or Thursday, and they saw my face in the rooms every single day. And I did that with a reason, so that I could say, what do you need from me? And so that when they did what I asked, I could say thank you from the bottom of my heart for doing what you're doing. And Hazelwood Elementary School went from D's and TPAS to straight A's within 6 months. Within a year, we were the first school in the county to receive reward status and achievement and growth in the same year. And was a National Title I Distinguished Award winner within 2. And that was because of collective efficacy of the educators, the teachers in that building. And all I did was say, this is what we're doing. What do you need from me? Thank you for doing it. And then a more recent story in MMPS, I did that with my executive directors. We built daily schedules. Monday through Thursday, you were in your buildings. You're not sitting in an office here. You cannot support schools if you're sitting in your office here. You were in buildings. Every week, I asked them, how did your schedule go? How did your calendar go? What stops you from getting it done? What do you need from me? How can I help? Is it a parent? Is it someone else calling a meeting? What is preventing it? And then every Friday, I get to have that meeting, I get to look them in the eye and celebrate their successes, and I get to genuinely tell them, thank you for that. And so those are the examples of how I build a team and how you build collective efficacy. And we've all been in that, we've all walked into that school where you can walk in and you can feel it. There's something different, there's something special there. I promise you, when you walk into a school and feel that, you'll find a principal who's been very clear about what they need, who has removed every barrier they can, and who tells people thank you. And that's what I look forward to building if I'm fortunate enough to serve here.
Thank
You.
Dr. Bellamy, explain what you have done to build and maintain a good relationship with your board and our administrative staff.
Thank you, Ms. Pace. So I would encourage you guys, if you need some light reading before bedtime, ask to see my last 360s when I was the level director of the elementary schools here. I think you'll see comments that say building relationships is the strength of the mind. And so, I mean, what it takes time. It takes time and interest. You have to intentionally schedule. You've heard me say multiple times that I'm a routines person. I talk about my stakeholder meetings, I talk about my own personal schedule. And so I will intentionally schedule time, not just to talk about business, but to invest in people. Each of you give an intense amount of time to this district. And you do so for your own reasons. And I need to know your story, I need to know your reasons, and we need to invest in one another. And I think Stephen Covey says you have an emotional bank account, and for every withdrawal you need to make 7 deposits. My goal is that I've deposited enough in everyone's emotional bank account that if I have to withdraw, I don't go into the red. And so you intentionally schedule the time, and I think I'll go back to Dr. McQueen's story. What is it you need from me? What is it I need from you? What barriers are in your way? And thank you for doing that. I wouldn't be where I am without the village that is CMCSS. I wouldn't be here without all these people in this room behind me. Some point or another have changed me immeasurably. Each of you have, and the work that I've done has been fortunate enough with you. And so I would look forward to building those relationships, and I would love to have a fancy answer about how I can fast track that and build relationships. The fact is it takes time and it takes trust. And so I'd intentionally schedule that time. I go back to my weekly schedule. It's built to invest in people, to be in my buildings, to see my principals. It's built to be with my direct reports, to be with my executive directors. It's built to be with my team. Prior to that, I'll go back to school visits as a level director. Every chance I got to go sit with the principal, to walk their building, to tell them thank you. You prioritize that. Because the other things I can do outside of other hours, I can answer emails, I can answer phone calls. I can't invest in people when you're already home. You need to do that on your time. I'll refer back to daily classroom visits at Hazelwood. Every classroom, every day, every child, every day. I beg my staff, if you don't see me or another administrator, I want you to call us out on it, because we are here for you, not here to sit in my office. And when I was in classrooms, I could build relationships with kids. Relationships, what it's all about, it's what we do. And so, going back to teaching, relationships with kids, rigor, relevance, relationships. All the research in the world will tell you that a teacher with great relationships will move mountains for kids. Thank you.
How would you work with your board to be effective and make good decisions and be respected as a board by the community?
Mr. Griffey, thank you for that question. First, I'm going to communicate proactively. I don't want you to ever hear something, good, bad, or otherwise, that didn't come from me first. And so I'm going to communicate proactively, and maybe the word I'd be looking for is aggressively. One of my mentors calls it politely persistent. And so I look to be that with you and communicate openly and honestly. Good, bad, or otherwise, I'm always going to be candid. You're always going to hear what you need from me to do your job. I will never keep information from you that's important for you to make a decision. Never. Whether that is good information, positive or not, it's important. The kids deserve it. Have to be transparent. You're going to make decisions, and I'm going to ask you to support decisions. And one way or the other, I'm going to be 100% clear with you as to what I expect will happen because of that decision. What are the pros and cons of each? I want to educate you as best I can to either empower you to make the decision that you need to make, or to support the decision that I've made. So communication, transparency, and finally, let's give credit where it's due. And I want to end tonight by talking about a meeting I presented to this exact board in 2019. I think it was January of 2019. Director House gave me the privilege of presenting to you and asking you for $1 million. Now that's in the middle of budget season, so this was not approved money yet. I asked this board for $1 million so that I could implement the Opportunity Culture ELTR program in 5 elementary schools, that we could hire 60 assistants, have them get their education paid for while earning a living wage, all the while implementing a system that is known to increase student achievement in our neediest schools. That became the ELTR program, that's nationwide now, an apprenticeship program Miguel Cardona's talked about, the news has been here featured. The fact is that wouldn't have happened without these people, without each of you. Without a board making a courageous decision to say, we're going to support this idea for these schools. Whether or not the commission funds our budget or not, we're giving you the green light and telling you we will find it somewhere and we support that. And so how am I going to make sure this board's respected? Because the board is what gives us the ability to make those courageous decisions. If you choose me as your director, I'm going to bring you innovation. I'm going to bring you, that won't be the last time you're featured on the news for a good reason. That much I promise you. We're going to change things. We're going to redesign the profession for educators. We're going to make sure this is the place people want to work. And you're going to be front and center of all that because none of it would happen without you. The ELTR program would not exist without this board giving its backing, being courageous and innovative and saying it should exist. And so whether it's a news program, a newspaper article, whether it's just seeing a graduate walk across the stage and shaking their hand, that's because of something you did. May not have been your idea, but you supported it and you created the conditions to allow it. And so that's how I'll make sure this board is well-informed and well-respected. I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you. I believe that's the end of my question.
Dr. Bellamy, thank you for applying for the position of Director of Schools. That concludes our process. We will go into a short recess. At 6:15, it will start the employee question period. We stand adjourned.